Please welcome Johanna Schneller.
Thank you. Hey, I'm very happy to be here. I am going to warn you that I am going to say the F word tonight in the library. So anybody who's upset about that, I apologize in advance. Now, the woman I'm about to introduce kind of tosses that word around like pancakes, so it won't. After a while, it won't be shocking to anybody. Meg Wolitzer wrote her first novel, Sleepwalking, about 3 university students who were obsessed with poetry and death when she herself was a university student at Brown. We forgive her for that because she's continued to write, lucky for us, and you know, at kind of a shocking pace, let's be honest. Book in 86, a book in 88. That one was called This Is Your Life, which became a movie written and directed by someone you might have heard of, Nora Ephron, who changed the title to This Is My Life, which I think is very Hollywood of her. Another book in 94, 98, Surrender Dorothy, also became a movie starring Diane Keaton. And then they just kept coming. The Wife, The Position, The 10-Year Nap. Uncoupling, which she wrote in 2011, is this right, the first book for a coast-to-coast book club via Skype, which is pretty exciting. She's also written in her spare time 2 books for young people and a cryptic crossword book, okay? In a recent article in the New York Times, she talked about lolling around on Sundays, and I think that's the only sentence she's ever written that didn't ring true for me. Her mother was a writer. Her husband is a writer, so we're going to be talking about that. She has 2 sons. She's taught lots of really interesting writing workshops in Iowa and Banff, and this September in Princeton. Her latest novel, which we're thrilled to be talking about tonight, The Interestings, is already a New York Times bestseller. If I can read my own writing here. She's got the kind of reviews that you can only dream of. She's been compared to Jonathan Franzen and Jeffrey Eugenides, with 2 interesting names who happen to be men, which we will also be talking about. The New York Times called it acutely perceptive with inclusive vision and generous sweep. The Globe and Mail, true to form, talked about her stinging wit and brutal insight. We're a little tougher here up north. And I'm so pleased that she's here to talk to us tonight. Please welcome Meg Wolitzer.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be back in Canada. I tell all my friends in New York, you've got to find a way to get your publisher to send you up there. They give you envelopes of cash to walk around and be a writer. It's very thrilling, but they do a little cash. Thank you for that lovely introduction. I am going to toss around the F word a little bit, just a little bit. And as far as the comparison with Jonathan Franzen, I don't know, maybe it's because of the glasses. I'm a little concerned that that's what it is. I'm going to read just a kind of like a little amuse-bouche of my novel, The Interestings. You know, the kind of thing that a restaurant like puts on the table for free so that you want to come back. So this is just a very small piece of the beginning, and it's also already kind of collapsed. But the novel, just to give you a sense of it, is about what happens to talent over time. And it starts at a summer camp in 1974. And you will see some of the main characters in this section. But the novel it follows for almost 40 years. And it goes back again and again to this summer. But we see the characters get older. I was really influenced by the Michael Apted films, the Up films, if any of you have seen them. I just love those films where you see the characters every 7 years, the people, the British kids, and follows every 7 years. I thought, what a wonderful thing. Let's just see what happens to these talented kids who we meet as teenagers. On a warm night in early July of that long evaporated year, the Interestings gathered for the very first time. They were only 15, 16, and they began to call themselves the name with tentative irony. Julie Jacobson, an outsider and possibly even a freak, had been invited in for obscure reasons, and now she sat in a corner on the unswept floor and attempted to position herself so she would appear unobtrusive yet not pathetic, which was a difficult balance. The teepee, designed ingeniously, though built cheaply, was airless on nights like this one. It had been miraculous when Ash Wolfe had nodded to her earlier in the night at the row of sinks and asked if she wanted to come join her and some of the others later. Some of the others, even that wording was thrilling. Julie had looked at her with a dumb, dripping face. Sure, she had said, out of instinct. What if she'd said no, she liked to wonder afterward? What if she'd turned down the lightly flung invitation and went about her life, thudding obliviously along like a drunk person, a blind person, a moron, someone who thinks that the small packet of happiness she carries is enough? Yet, having said sure, at the girls' bathroom sink, here she was now, planted in the corner of this unfamiliar, ironic world. Irony was new to her and tasted oddly good, like a previously unavailable summer fruit. Soon she and the rest of them would be ironic much of the time, unable to answer an innocent question without giving their words a snide little adjustment. Fairly soon after that, the snideness would soften, the irony would be mixed with seriousness, and the years would shorten and fly. Then it wouldn't be long before they all found themselves shocked and sad to be fully grown into their thicker, finalized adult selves with almost no chance for reinvention. That night, though, long before the shock and the sadness and the permanence, as they sat in the wooden boys' teepee for the first time, Ash Wolf said, "Every summer we sit here like this. We should call ourselves something." "Why?" said Goodman, her brother, "so the world can know just how unbelievably interesting we are?" "We could be called the unbelievably interesting ones," said Ethan Figman. "How's that?" "The interesting," said Ash. "That works." So it was decided. "From this day forward, because we are clearly the most interesting people who ever lived," said Ethan, "let us be known as the Interestings, and let everyone who meets us fall down dead in our path from just how fucking interesting we are." In a ludicrously ceremonial moment, they lifted paper cups and joints. The name was ironic, and the improvisational christening was jokily pretentious, but still, Julie Jacobson thought, they were interesting. These teenagers around her, all of them from New York City, were like royalty and French movie stars with a touch of something papal. Briefly, in that summer of 1974, when she or any of them looked up from their one-act plays and animation cells and dance sequences and acoustic guitars, they found themselves staring into a horrible doorway, and so they quickly turned away. Two boys had copies of All the President's Men on the shelves above their beds. The book had come out only a couple of weeks before camp began, and at night, when the teepee talk wound down into sleep or rhythmic, crickety masturbation, they would read by flashlight. Can you believe those fuckers, they thought? This was the world they were meant to enter, a world of fuckers. Julie Jacobson and the others paused before the doorway to that world, and what were they supposed to do, just walk through it? By the end of the summer, Nixon would lurch away, leaving his damp slug trail, and the entire camp would watch on an old Panasonic that had been trundled into the dining hall by the camp owners, Manny and Edie Wunderlich, two aging socialists who were legendary in the tiny, diminishing world of aging socialists. Now they were gathering because the world was unbearable, and they themselves were not. During that first hour, books were discussed, mostly ones written by spiky and disaffected European writers. Günter Grass is basically God, said Goodman Wolfe, and the two other boys agreed. Julie had never actually heard of Günter Grass, but she wasn't going to let on. If anyone asked, she would insist that she too loved Günter Grass, although she would add as protection, I haven't read as much of him as I would like. I think Anais Nin is God, Ash said. How can you say that, said her brother. She's the worst. Anais Nin and Günter Grass both have umlauts, remarked Ethan. Maybe that's the key to their success. I'm going to get one for myself. As Julie felt the effects of Ethan Figman's wet-ended joint, she imagined all their saliva joining on a cellular level, and, shocked, she thought, we are all nothing more than a seething, collapsing ball of cells. Ethan, she saw, was looking at her intently. Maybe you want to slow down a little over there, he said. He then turned back to the others, but in her precarious state, she felt that he had made himself her protector. She kept thinking a high person's thoughts about how they were all just countless cells that had joined together to make this group that Julie Jacobson suddenly decided she was in love with and actually would stay in love with for the rest of her life. So I'll stop there.
Well, thank you very much for that. That gives everybody a nice little taste. And since you mentioned the Up films, 7 Up, 14 Up, I have to ask you, is any of this even the slightest bit autobiographical? Was there a camp? Was there a group? Was there?
Yes, there was a summer camp in the Berkshires of Massachusetts that I went to in the summer of 1974, and it did change my life. However, I'm partly that person, at least then, There's nothing in the book that follows afterward that's autobiographical. Can you all hear me okay? Is this working? Okay, great. But I went to that camp and I felt as though I came home a different person. I mean, there's a moment in the novel when Julie's mother, who's widowed, picks her up and drives her home in the station wagon, and she feels like she's the victim of a silent but violent kidnapping. I sort of felt that way with my mother. Why are you making me go live with you? I sort of felt like this sophisticate, when in fact, when I'd gone there, I was like, the Roschast cartoons in the New Yorker, how all the girls sort of look like this? That's sort of the way I felt when I went there. And things happened. I met these incredible kids. I acted in plays. I opened up, and I just changed over 8 weeks. It was sort of like one of those speeded up growth of a flower films, as much as it was like Michael Apted. After that, I love making things up. I never really write autobiographically. And I wouldn't want to hurt people I know or make them too full of themselves. So, you think you're special?
Both dangerous, both dangerous. What was your household like growing up? Your mother was a writer. How much?
Yeah, and she is still. She's a wonderful writer named Meg Wolitzer. My household was very different from Julie's household in the book, which is basically a house without culture. My household was filled with books. We lived in a very modest ranch house in a suburb where all the houses were sort of all like each other. But I remember a girl named Bonnie Neller came over to my house, and we had a nude painting over the couch, and she said, "How could you have that?" And I was so ashamed. But after I went to this camp, how could we not have that? So my parents basically, injected me with fiction. But the thing about that I realized looking at it over time is that, your parents can fill you with all the art in the world, but you need for them not to be around in order for it to fully take. Life is sort of like a Peanuts cartoon. The parents are banished somewhere else. Maybe there's the occasional wah-wah teacher voice. But when things really start to come together, I think it's when you find your cohort. And that's what happened to me that summer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you sort of feel like you found your tribe.
You did. I did. I really found my tribe.
Yeah.
I mean, we sang Mozart requiems every morning. And when I first got there, I called my mother from the phone in the grotto. "Mother, they make me sing Mozart requiems. I'm so bored." And then by the end of the summer, Dixie Domine. I'm like completely. I have drunk the pretentious Kool-Aid.
Yes. You don't sing Mozart requiems at your camp? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry about that. Yeah. Now, have you always lived in New York City?
Yeah. Since I graduated from college, I've taught, and I've had visiting writer stints, and I taught upstate New York at Skidmore. I went out to Iowa to the Writers' Workshop. But yes, I have.
Because
Absolutely.
It's so interesting, because you write, and I mean this in the best possible sense, a kind of every person can relate to it. And a lot of times people think that people who live in New York have a very particular sensibility. I find that in this book and in a lot of your books, there's something fundamentally New York about them, but they could live in almost any city. It isn't New York specific in that way. You're writing about the people who are ultrasound technicians and things that you can be in other cities.
I'm just interested in people. I mean, I have a deep interest in what makes us vulnerable and ashamed and afraid and excited about things. And I think that really does follow across, geography.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And age. Also, I wanted to ask you, this book goes in and out of chronology. You flash back, you flash forward. Let's talk about just that. That seems to be, I hate to use this word, but a kind of trend in writing now, and in a lot of films I see, the linear chronology seems to have been deemed not interesting enough or not rich enough. Talk to me about.
Yeah, I struggled with that a little bit about how to do this, because I started, as you see, in 1974, and in the very first line, here is a change that I added. The line now reads, "On a warm night in early July of that long evaporated year, the interestings gathered for the very first time." When I first wrote that line, it was on a warm night in early July of that year. And I wasn't happy with it, because it seemed like the book might stay in that year, and therefore might feel like a teen novel in some way. But look what happens when you add long evaporated year. I feel like a lot of things in fiction do double duty. They serve double purpose. And that line, are some of you writers? Okay, good. So, things serve extra purpose. So if you put in long evaporated year, you know that time has passed. And you know that there's sort of a wistful, melancholy quality to it in some way, that will appear in the book. And you kind of have the sense that adulthood is going to appear in the novel too. So you learn all of this without being told it directly. But I think time is very interesting. And I guess, Johanna, what I think is that it may not be so much that people are losing interest with the linear, but that they're becoming more free to use time as another element in a novel, and not to be afraid of it. Because, if you think about it, like, we're always told when you're a student of, if you're an English major or in high school, there's the flashbacks, and there's the present tense, and there's past tense. But in fact, while you're sitting here, you might have thought of something in childhood. So you went back into the past. Or you might be thinking, God, I'm hungry. When will she ever stop? So you're thinking about the future. So you're kind of toggling back and forth. And I feel like my interior life is so much like that. So that I thought I would put that in the book a bit.
Yeah, I certainly feel that way looking at my reflection in the mirror, where I'm thinking I've look a certain way, and then it's like, oh, yeah.
I think time is just so fluid and strange. And now that I've gotten, older, I just can't, my friends and I say to each other, can you believe that we're this age? What did we think? Or can you believe so-and-so died? What, we were exempt? But I think everybody thinks so. Because otherwise, how could you live? And that's I kind of wanted to put that in the book.
Yeah, what's interesting to me about this and all your books is, a lot of times the story is up until a certain point, and then they live happily ever after, or the end of something. You're very committed to the middle.
Yeah.
The middle of a marriage, the middle of a person's life, the stuff that gets overlooked in a lot of books. Can you talk to me a little bit about that?
Yeah, I hadn't thought of it that way, but what she said, yeah. I like to think of myself as a middle woman, I definitely think that where you set a novel or a scene or a short story, it takes place really on the most concentrated bouillon cube day, not necessarily like the day that huge things happen, but a day that kind of explains what the whole is like. So if you look at the middle, it's not, this book starts at the beginning, right? Starts at the moment she wakes up and becomes herself. Now, maybe you all have a moment like that. You don't necessarily have to have gone to summer camp, but a moment when you found what you wanted to be in some way, who you felt like, even if it was different from what your parents had thought you were going to be. And that's a very exciting beginning. But for chapter 3, I jump ahead to this character when she's in her when she's 50 years old. And we see who she's married. And we see some of the characters from chapter 1 in a kind of maybe shocking, in shocking relationships to each other, things that we didn't expect would happen. And that's still the middle, but I go back, the middle is where all the stuff is. Life gets lived.
Mm-hmm. But what's very interesting to me is that a lot of this stuff in the middle can be occasionally tarred with the brush of, women's writing. Like, women care about what we're having for dinner, and women care about getting the kids to school. And there's a big debate raging now in the literary world about, Wikipedia, tried to separate out women's books from other books. So there's women's fiction and then there's fiction, as if they're two different things. I know the writer Claire Massoud had a big kind of to-do with Publishers Weekly about, would you ask a man that question? You, interestingly, in an essay that you wrote, I think last year, talked about the difference in covers of books that are women's books. They often have like teacups or laundry on the cover, you said. And I noticed this book does not have that. A man could read this book on the subway and not have to worry about. And also you talked about women's books have to be a certain length. This book, I notice, doesn't conform to any length. Where do you stand on this whole gender? Do you partake or?
Partake of the debate?
Yes. Do you believe that there's a ghetto? Do you believe that this is something
this essay I wrote a year ago for the New York Times Book Review, which was called The Second Shelf, that the Times came up with a sort of clever title, was about how my feeling was, I've been thinking about it for a long time, having been a writer, since college, that there were some novels by women that were as literary as ones by men, but were seen as less important by virtue of a bunch of different things. Sometimes how they looked sort of kept them down. Sometimes, right, the subject matter. I mean, if you look at a Jonathan Franzen novel, it's been said by other writers before that, some of the male writers, when they talk about a marriage, like they're talking about America, and when women talk about it, they're this is a domestic novel, and that can really happen. So I absolutely agree that can really, really happen, and we need to keep talking about it. This organization, VITA, this women's organization, started doing something they call the count. They started looking at the numbers of women who were represented as book reviewers and also book reviewees in the top literary publications, the TLS in London, the New York Times Book Review, the Paris Review, all kinds of places. And the numbers are appalling. They really are. There's a great disparity. Men outnumber women. And yet we say this is so strange because there's so many women writers. Fiction readers are overwhelmingly female. What's that about? Why is it that the very top we seem to look again and again toward men? I do think that's true. Of course there are big exceptions. It was thrilling when Jennifer Egan won the Pulitzer Prize, or Elizabeth Strout, if you read Olive Kitteridge. But you really have to kind of look at a 10-year study to see if the changes are happening as opposed to a 2-year study. All I know to do is write. The best guidance that I ever got as a writer was from another writer, Mary Gordon, who had been my teacher. And she said, write what's important. And if people think that what you're writing is domestic or not important, you just keep writing what you write. And you have to just sort of write it with passion. And there are readers. And we live in a time when I think there are passionate readers who feel the pain of what's happening in the book culture. They feel, that bookstores are dying and that things are shifting and changing. But it's definitely true that there are disparities, but there are some exceptions, and we're hopeful that things are changing.
I want to put you on the spot. Do you ever feel that you've been marginalized or dismissed? Or
Oh yeah, in fact, I opened this piece with an anecdote, something that had happened to me at a party some years ago. I met a man, and he sort of asked what I did, and I said I was a writer, and he said, would I have heard of you? And the worst question in the world. And I described the work that I wrote, and I said that it was sometimes about marriage, explorations of marriage, motherhood, sexuality, and he sort of, wanted me to talk to his wife. He said, oh, you should meet my wife. Like immediately sort of lost interest. And I realized that the only good answer when someone asks, would I have heard of you, is in a more just world, So it has absolutely happened to me that this idea that what I write, also because I've written about women a lot, is therefore for women. You want to write a novel that anyone can feel they can read. It doesn't have to be about them. There is a fetish of the notion of sort of relating to the character. I think that a culture that embraces fiction is a culture of empathy. I mean, I think there are some very important qualities that fiction give to a culture. And if there are books that people talk about, you feel like, in fact, the Jonathan Franzen books, they became so huge in the States that men and women, people were talking about them at dinner parties, and this is a serious novel. And I thought that was great. You want to see that happen. I feel that used to happen more. There was a period in time, and I talk about this in the piece too, it was sort of no accident that someone like Margaret Atwood, Toni Morrison, Louise Erdrich, these writers came to prominence around the same time that the second wave feminism was becoming a big thing, because people, men and women alike, sort of wanted to hear from women's voices as well as men, and that was a great golden moment, I think. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's happened to me. I felt sort of dissed, or that men wouldn't read your book. I've been lucky with the book covers. In fact, my publisher, the art department read the essay that I'd written, so it scared them, I guess. I was saying that covers, I noticed after I did the piece, there were a lot of covers of books by women that were like women in water, girls suspended in water, which has this dreamy quality. And then books by men would be like a skyline or just big blocky letters that say this book is an event. But then you have laundry on a line or a mermaid. It's hey, you see two men. Hey, Bill. Yeah, Jim. Did you read that new mermaid novel? I love it. It's no. Yeah. Oh, that one with the little girl in the dress in the field of wheat. Oh, yeah. Can I borrow that? That's not going to happen. So these things matter. They send a message. And what is the message that you're sending? You don't want to exclude, half the population from being your readers.
I think when someone asks you, what do you write about, you should say sex,
Oh,
right?
right.
I tell the truth about sex.
Right. Yeah.
And then I think people will,
No, I should just sort of say, I write about chocolate, right? I mean, something that everybody likes and
that
nobody's
everybody
freaked out
relates.
by.
I think you should stick with sex. That you brought up this whole notion of Franzen, and I think one of the things that a lot of people talked about with his last couple of books was the issue of likability, and I think you see this a lot. That was the question that set off, quite rightly, Claire Massoud, would you like your character, Nora? Would you like to hang around with her? How much do you care? Do you have to like your characters? Do we have to like them? Where do you stand on that?
Yeah, I thought that was a great response that she gave, really. What kind of question is that, she said. Because we don't write, I don't know anyone who writes novels to sort of like have more friends. Like, the characters are not like hand puppets that, that you want to be with. But characters can be likable. I mean, I'm not against that. But people, we're not all likable entirely. I mean, I have qualities, that I want to hide about myself, or qualities that the worst part is I have qualities that I think are really good and I push them forward, and other people are probably saying, oh, don't you hate that thing about her? I think people are so complicated. And likability, I think, has been something that has been, that women writers have been told more. I've heard this again and again, that publishers have said, make her more likable, as if it's more fun to read a book like hanging out with the characters on Sex and the City. Now, if you want to write that kind of book, I'm not at all against anyone writing whatever kind of book they want to write. I mean, there's no mandate. Books should reflect. It was a great line from Zadie Smith in an essay. She said that she writes to express her way of being in the world. And most people I know, if you were to do that, likability appears in flashes, but it's probably not the dominant thing that most writers I know are interested in.
Yeah, I can't remember who said this, but the thing that always sticks with me is that somebody said, I read books because I want to know how other people experience being alive.
Yeah.
And I think that's
right.
Yeah,
I feel like novels are like a snapshot of a moment in time when the writer lived and was writing. And there's so many ways into a book. It's like, I did an event with Elizabeth Strout on character, and she said that when she started Olive Kitteridge, she saw a very large woman standing by a picnic table. And I thought that was so great. It's like, I was fascinated by that. I couldn't imagine starting a book of my own that way. But I feel like books are like advent calendars. There are so many doors or windows in, and you have to find the one that is most comfortable for you.
So what is yours? Do you start with an image, a sentence, a person? What generally is your way in?
These days I start with an idea, and the characters kind of follow in afterwards, because I don't want to write a sort of book of theory. But I'll start with an idea like, what happens to talent over time? Or I wrote a novel called The Position, which was about 4 kids whose parents had written a kind of Joy of Sex book in the 1970s, using themselves as the models, and what happens to the kids when they grew up. And that book was about the juncture of sex and the family, how they don't really go together. I wrote a novel called The Wife that was about a big sort of bloated male novelist and his wife, and it was really about power in a marriage and male power and female collaboration with that. And once I had the idea kind of firmly, it's sort of like having a title. Like, if you don't have a title, sometimes I feel the book can feel a little unmoored because you're not sure of what it's about. But once you get the title or the idea, the characters kind of rush up to the door and want to come in.
Okay, here's where the F word comes in. You use the word fucking in marriage, in like a happy, this is what we do. And I think that's kind of a radical choice almost. Like, a lot of people, once you get to be married and you're writing about your spouse, it's certainly in print they don't use that word.
Yeah, I can't remember I wish you could find, the context, because it's all, for me, it's all about where it appeared and, what the context was. Yeah, I mean, I think those words like all make us crazy, including me too. But like making love also like embarrasses me as much. It's like, there's no way around it. In fact, some of what I've written about sex has really been about awkwardness and about the not quite rightness of how to sort of describe things. So it may have had some of that in it. I don't really know.
There's also a kind of, you're not afraid of going to where things are uncomfortable. And the fact is that in most lives, people have more periods of sort of boredom or frustration or angst than they do happiness or joy. And you write about that, and you're very forthright about that. And I wonder, is there ever like a little voice in your head thinking, oh, they gotta start to have fun again now because it's,
Well, I mean, it's a novel. It's not representative of the whole thing. Mm-hmm. It's representative of what I'm trying to sort of grapple with in a way. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it's sort of like somebody I know, like a therapist said to a friend of mine, you never talk about being happy. It's like, yeah, I talk about it to my friend. I don't talk about it to you, mm-hmm. Lady. It may be a little bit similar, but I like to be funny, so maybe that's my version of happy. I mean, that shows that I don't feel that wit should be excluded from a novel to give it gravitas. In fact, I think it doesn't do that. Mm-hmm. I hope the characters are happy sometimes. I think there are real bursts of happiness in this book.
I think you walk an interesting line between honest and depressing. You know what I mean?
Really?
Like you don't, and I mean that in the best possible way.
You're going to scare them off.
No,
I don't care for depressing. Right.
No, it's just true. I think it's just truth-telling. And I think that it's sort of like when you tell your friends a story, like you start to tell them how, you had a stupid fight at the restaurant or whatever it is, the kids were crying and this happened and that happened. And then you can see their eyes glaze over and then you go, but it's fine, I'm fine, how are you? I'm fine. I think you're willing to peel back the veneer.
You kind of have to. I did a panel some years ago with a couple of writers, and a woman was on the panel, and she came up afterwards and she said to the other writers, there's so much I want to write about, but I have to show up at my kids' school in the morning and and see the other mothers. And I just don't, how do you do that? I can't do that. And I felt sorry for her because you're going to not write about things because of women you don't even like, But it's a hard thing that we all think about. I mean, I basically hide behind the sort of, the Wonder Woman fiction belt. It's fiction, I can write about anything because I don't know what, you have to just, this is it. This is your one life, they tell me. This is your one life. I mean, my motto has sort of lately become, if not now, when? I mean, as I get older. So the idea of telling the truth, it's not even about writing things that are necessarily painful, because they're, as I said, they're not necessarily or likely to be autobiographical in some way, but you want to go as far as you can as a writer, because this is really it. I mean, push has come to shove, We're at a period of time in the culture when books are seen differently, that this new thing has come along, the internet, and has made our concentration change, has made our time that's available for reading be spent on other things. What are you, as a fiction writer, I ask myself, going to do about it? All you can do is write what matters to you, is write what feels that you're pushing yourself the hardest. And that often does lead to writing about uncomfortable things, I think. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think it's also really interesting, the details that you, in the midst of the kind of the biggest things happening, Watergate and 9/11 and things that in the course of a 40-year novel you also write about, what shoes they're all wearing in any given, like the Dr. Scholl years,
right,
that sort of thing. Talk to me a little bit about balancing that, the giant and the tiny.
I tend to be like an observer of both, like the dumbest little things in the culture and the biggest, because I think that's true of all of us, really, because we're not like discerning. When you live through something, well, first of all, I maintain that when you come of age remains the most vivid time in your life, and you could probably, remember smells. I can remember all the lyrics to all those songs from, Carole King's Tapestry album. I mean, all of that is readily available to me. And in fact, my version of singing them will be outside in the lobby for $14.95. No, so I remember even the smallest things, but I also want to sort of then draw a larger conclusion about sort of the political climate at the time. So I don't even see them as that separate necessarily. I see them as part of how we live now. And it's so crazy and absurd that there are sort of trends going on while terrible things are happening politically. You're not just a political animal, nor are you just a social one. You are many things. And I think if a novel's trying to be ambitious in some way, it probably takes on a little bit of how it felt to be around in that time. And this is, to the best of my ability, this book tracks how it feels to be alive at these different points in time.
You're also, your subject very frequently is this thing that we've, like certainly everyone that I know who grew up when I did, just sort of the just post-feminist era is how I like to think of it. You were born in 59, is that right? Me, 62. And my mother worked, your mother worked. Like how to be a woman, I think, has been the kind of centrally occupying question of our generation. And just I'll start there and then we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, my mother, who's a novelist, as you heard, became one really because of the women's movement. I mean, she had not been to college. Her parents didn't think it was important to her to do that. She started selling short stories back when, I don't know if this is true in Canada to the extent that it was true in the States, women's magazines published short stories, like Red Book, like magazines published great fiction. You'd see, a recipe for Jell-O, and then on the next page it's Joyce Carol Oates. It's like, what? That's not happening now. And my mother sold a short story to the old Saturday Evening Post, which published excellent fiction, and she bought a station wagon and her, liberation, really. And I, at the same time, was watching all this and watched how that affected her, but how it was difficult, how it was hard for that first group of women as men resented some of what was happening, as they weren't sure how far they could go with it. My mother's first short story was called "Today a Woman Went Mad in the Supermarket." So it dealt with some of that suburban angst. I know, I love that.
Every day.
I actually started a consciousness-raising group in my high school, and we wrote away, we were like 14, and I wrote away to the National Organization of Women asking them for suggested topics. And they sent us a pamphlet that had things like sexual fulfillment in you, when we wanted when your mom won't listen. But I think that these issues, the weird thing about these issues is we thought they would be resolved. They are not resolved, you know this. They're not resolved. I wrote this novel, The 10-Year Nap, that refers to the period of time when after a baby is born and certain women stop working thinking they're going to go back soon, but then 10 years have passed and they're not sure where they fit in the workplace, what they want to do. And, I got a lot of hot-headed stuff about that book. When you write about motherhood, when you write about work and women and men, look at the Sheryl Sandberg debate. I mean, people go crazy over these things. People feel that their lives are at stake. We thought all of that was going to be resolved. I thought my mother and her friends were going to take care of all of that in the 70s, but they didn't. It's still going on.
Mm-hmm. Do you think we blew it? Do you think that we dropped the ball in order to say, like, we're not shaking things up that much, or we're not that different from men, or we can work the 80-hour work weeks too, instead of changing it?
I think a lot of mistakes were made. I mean, one thing in the States is that there is no readily available cheap childcare, and this is an issue that I think would have changed things in a really, really big way. I mean, had that been worked on, there was too much idealism probably about it. Yeah, sure. The idea of having it all, I don't really know what that means. A friend said that maybe it's not so much about having it all as it is about having a lot of several things, So I like to think of it that way. Like, what's a meaningful life? What's a good life? Well, you'll know it if you have it.
You write a lot about what's a full enough life, as if there's a kind of measurable amount of stuff. that we're supposed to have in it, and how does one know when one's life is full enough? When are you settling? When are you accepting? When are you ambitious? When are you crazy? That axis.
Right.
Is that a question that troubles you? Is that something that...
No, I mean, I've always been in motion. Like, I like having a lot going on. Nora Ephron, who became a very good friend of mine, was always so project-based. It's sort of like the diorama school of work, where there's always a project going on in the corner. And I feel like that is the people I know who are happiest, they are involved in projects. They don't have to be artists. They're just involved in a lot of things that are going to be made manifest in the future. Because look at what that gives you. Sort of hope that there is a future, first of all, and that we might take that for granted, but this idea that there's something to work toward makes when you wake up in the morning, like when I was writing this novel, I read if some of you have read the Edward St. Aubyn novels, the Patrick Melrose novels, which I think is this extraordinary suite of books that were a really important project for this writer, and that, they've all been published in one volume, this British writer. I felt like what a massive project that was, what an undertaking over many years. And you just knew that when he woke up in the morning, or at least my fantasy is like he was already thinking about what was next. And I love that feeling. I mean, when I'm writing, when I'm working on something. Do you know what I mean? Do you have
Yes,
that?
yeah, sometimes being in the middle of something is the best time. You're not done with it yet, so it hasn't disappointed you yet.
Well, maybe that goes back to my middle
Yeah.
that you said about, that's why I do it.
That's why.
Yeah.
The books are just going to get longer and longer so you can live in the middle. Now, here's a maybe slightly tricky question. The most successful character in your book is Ethan, who writes, who's always doodling and drawing and has a world in his head that eventually becomes an enormously successful television series, comic strip, merchandising, not unlike The Simpsons, I would say, if that's fair. Did you ever consider giving that to Ash? Was there...
No. Ethan is the boy at the beginning, the one who sort of looks out for her when they're endlessly smoking pot at the beginning of this book in 1974. And he's a very homely boy, but he's a genius. I just sort of knew who he was right away, and I just didn't think about it any other way. He falls in love with Julie. Her name is changed to Jules that very night. Ash, the beautiful girl, calls her Jules, and she instantly wants to be Jules because it's a much cooler name. And for the rest of the book, she's Jules. Julie disappears, falls away. Ethan falls in love with her, kisses her. She's not interested in him, and she sort of recoils, but she loves him because he's so wonderful. He's so good-hearted, and he's brilliant, and he will always be ardent toward her, but he's a real original. And I wanted to write about someone who, talent is like kind of in them from birth, really. He lies in bed at night, and he creates his name is Ethan Figman, and he creates a show called Figland as a child, and it becomes this Simpsons-like show when he's an adult called Figland. But I saw him as a boy as opposed to a girl, and I also have to say that kind of show and that kind of talent, and this comes back to gender, would it have been possible if the main character was a girl? I don't think so at that level. I don't think so. There's a line in the book, there is no expression girl genius, and Jules sort of says this angrily. But no, I always saw him, that belonged to him. It just was the way it was.
And where do you stand on this whole notion? Because I sort of feel like I don't know what the alternative is. The alternative is that we're all exhausted all the time because that's what life is, that you're always in the process of this and you're never doing anything fully and you're never... Is there a solution? Is there an alternative? It seems to me that in your book you come down on the side of work, the value of having some work.
The alternative to what? I'm not sure I know.
In this sort of issue of women, do you stay at home with your kids? Do you what is a good life? What is a worthy life? When you're doing it right? It seems to me that work is a place where you always come back to.
I come down on the side of purpose. I come down on whatever makes a person feel most purposeful, I think is going to make them happiest. We put happiness, actually, I'm not even that interested in happiness. I feel like there's so many complications that there's a relief to think, is there a way, like if Oprah magazine or another magazine says, happiness, it's like we want to read about that. What, can I have some of that too? But in fact, I don't know about you, but I mean, for every happy thought, I mean, there will be some dart piercing it of something. And it's not that it's ruining it, it's just making it more real. I don't judge. I mean, when I started writing the 10-Year Nap, I was much more judgmental of those women who didn't work. But I realized that some of the women I knew through my kids' school who had left jobs and stayed at home, this is before the economy crashed. This was before 2008. I think that the book would have been different after 2008 because some of the men who ended up leaving jobs became stay-at-home fathers because of the economy, and that sort of increased that a bit. But my sense really was that the jobs that some of them had, the big corporate jobs, were not fulfilling to them. It's not that work is the thing that everybody should do, because a corporation doesn't love you. A corporation is not a person, contrary to what Mitt Romney said, and a corporation might not tell you you're good. It might not fulfill you, but you're there doing it. Like, why are you doing it? Most families, most couples do need to both work for the money, but where's the meaning? You know, that's what I think people are looking for. So for me, you know, I have kids, I'm married, I have a lot of work. That all works well. We all feel, my husband who's a writer, he and I both feel like we have one foot on a banana peel all the time. I mean, I sometimes see kids, I wistfully look at like these kids, when my kids were little, who were, you know, whose sort of hair was slicked back more neatly than my son's, and, you know, I was always sort of playing Clue with like, yeah, Mrs. White in the conservatory with a knife. Okay, now I'm finishing a novel. You know, we liked that we were home, but we weren't fully home. Something always was a little bit lessened. Something wasn't right. But you know, what is life? It's like if you hold yourself to an ideal that there is a perfect way to live, I think you'll feel unhappy. I'm on the side of productivity, I guess, as opposed to product.
You mentioned that you do sort of feel like your life is like the Quickie Mart, like you have to be open all the time to be able, like, if something strikes you. And my husband also is a writer, and there are many days where we play Can You Top My Pain? I have a deadline. No, I have a deadline. I'm in more agony. I can't write anymore. How do you and your husband
we do that too.
Yeah.
We should all have dinner. Yeah, I know. That would really be. No, we're that way too. It's like we're home all day. I mean, during the day we sort of ignore each other as best we can and sort of like walk past each other like coworkers, you know, in a law firm, just sort of like, although Jerry Seinfeld had a funny bit about that, about like people in an office, like, why do they feel they have to say hello to each other when they run into each other 5 minutes later? Hey, you know, you have to acknowledge each other. But we have just abandoned that. We just sort of gloomily walk past each other. But sometimes one of us sort of almost needs to kind of sing the aria of pain and sort of stand in front of the other and say, and now they want the piece tomorrow and it's 2,000 words. And the other one goes, oh, you know, and pretends to look concerned, but is of course thinking, yes, you know, dear, you know, my work is far. My husband, who is a science writer and just wrote a book with Temple Grandin that just came out. I mean, and he writes about cosmology a lot. Like, I'll be in there taking a break from my work, watching some horrible TV show, and he'll walk through with like a giant tome by Stephen Hawking, and I'll just be like, all right, you know, and he'll just give me a withering look. It's like a very funny moment. He'll just sort of, you know, basically be like, I rest my case. You know? So I can't really get away with, you know, I think, yes, but we know what the other's going through, and that's the beauty of it, I think. You absolutely try to make the other one feel that you have it really hard. Absolutely.
Yes, I have convinced my husband that like my watching The Real Housewives of Atlanta or something
was
is
what-
research.
I didn't want to say it, but that's the show that I meant. I'm not kidding.
Yeah.
We have these long conversations. He's like, how can you, I actually watched The Real Housewives of Orange County, and he said, how can you watch this? And I say, how can you not? You know?
It's the rich pageantry of human life, dear. Now, you mentioned Nora Ephron. Do you have a Nora story? Do you have a moment or anything that you...
You know, I went out to dinner with a bunch of people, including Nora, long ago. Oh, and by the way, it was a legal question about changing the title of the movie to This Is My Life because of the old TV show, This Is Your Life.
Okay.
Titles are public domain in books, but apparently they're not in other forms. They're trickier. but she wanted to keep the title, but wasn't able to. So we went out for dinner. This isn't really anything juicy or all that interesting, but it struck me as being very descriptive of her. So this was back in the era when candied walnuts suddenly came on the scene, and every salad had them in the, do you remember that? They were everywhere, and everybody loved them. So if you put candied walnuts in a dish, everybody would order it, on the menu in a restaurant. So we ran around the table, and everybody said, I'll have the salad with the candied walnuts, I'll have the salad with the candied walnuts. It went around, it got to Nora, and she said, I'll have the salad with the candied walnuts, but I'd like double walnuts. And I thought, here's somebody who knew what was great in life and knew how to ask for what she wanted. She knew how to get the pleasure out of life. And it would never have occurred to me to do that, but you can do that. You can do that, and you can give yourself permission to find what's really great in life. It just seemed like a great metaphor for her, because she really was she loved food, she loved people, she loved helping other writers. She had another thing, after she died, all these women started writing these essays about how Nora invited her over and, wanted to introduce her to this one or that. I mean, it's like you would think from all of this that she had no time to work. But she was incredibly generous to younger women writers, and it was astonishing. We were going around this movie, This Is My Life, which was with Julie Kavner, Marge Simpson's voice. It was about a stand-up comic and her two daughters. And we were going around to look at women comics in the city. Now, this was that period of time in the late 80s, early 90s, when, if you remember female comics, they had that really big hair, and they wore those suits. Lily Tomlin with a thing on top, like with a bow, yes. And Lily Tomlin had a line about it that I'll get wrong, but it was like those dress for success suits. She said, "It isn't a bow and it isn't a tie, and you don't threaten anyone because you don't look good in it." So we went around to these big-haired women comics, and one night, Nora and her sister Delia, who co-wrote the movie, wanted me to come with them, and it was childbirth class. And I'm such a goody-goody. I was like, I can't miss childbirth class. And Nora said to me, all right, you have to come with us. I'll tell you what they were going to teach you tonight. So I went. It was great. I got through the delivery.
Yeah. That is I can't remember if this line is in the book as well as in the movie, but there's a line that my friends and I have often quoted to one another about how your kids would rather have you miserable in the next room than ecstatic in Hawaii.
Yes, it's true. And it really addressed at an early point that tension, really, that mothers often feel. I mean, fathers do too, and it's changing and becoming much more co-ed. But between things that, children are such narcissists. They really imagine that their mother is, like there's a thought bubble over their mother's head. What will he have for dinner tonight, and what will he have for lunch tomorrow? And but in fact, they might be thinking about their work, or they might be thinking about their friends. And when a child realizes that, it's sort of shocking, because it shows that the mother is not only attached to them. And the tension between those lives, is extraordinary and interesting to write about.
Mm-hmm. And you've also written, getting too much attention feels like a fever in your head. How have you've gotten some attention now, you've on, great book tours, and lots of people want to read your books. And so how do you keep yourself on an even keel?
The problem with being a writer is that in a given day, especially because of the internet, if you are so crazy as to, and I don't do this, but people I know have Google News alerts on themselves, so here you are, you're waking up, oh, good morning, world, it's a great day. Wolitzer's newest book lands with a horrible thud. It's like, I just woke up and I was feeling so happy, and now I have to feel, you can go from feeling really great about yourself to feeling bad about yourself. But, they say that, people say to you when you get a bad review, you can't believe the bad reviews. But the truth is, if you can't believe the bad ones, you can't believe the good ones. So you're back to kind of square one, which is sort of where everyone is. You're back to just sort of saying, did I do what I set out to do? Am I able to support my family, which is very important to me? I write a lot because I'm married to a writer and I'm a writer. Neither of us comes from families of any money, and we're proud to make a living primarily from doing this thing that we love so much. And also I have the ideas just come, and I want to sort of honor them as they do, because I think it does get harder. My mother had a period where she didn't write for 12 years. And it was like this wilderness. It was so painful for her. And then she suddenly did. And it was like lancing some terrible boil. That's a beautiful image. I'm going to use that in my next book. In fact, I realized a few years ago that when my books started getting better, I think, all of them the titles began with the. It started with a book called The Wife. So I kind of feel that that's the secret to success. But I feel now my next book, should it be called The Boil? What do you think?
Boil.
Is that ka-ching?
The is definitive. The something. Like
Right,
that.
it's the only one. There can't be another
it's
one.
the answer. Do you have one on the go now? Do you always?
I'm
are
just
you always?
beginning one now, and I'm still, I love to work so much, and what I do is when I write something and I sort of send it to myself on my iPhone. So I'm looking at like the Easy Bake Oven version of my novel in a tiny little thing, so that I didn't want to be away from these characters for very long when I was writing the interestings. I don't know exactly what this will be yet, but I was talking to my publisher and she said, go have a look at what we said originally you were going to write this book about. And I looked at the contract, and it said it might as well have said a look at the Syrian war in Syria. I mean, it was so removed from what I ended up writing, because that's just sort of filler. It's like Mad Libs, insert adjective here. Only know what a book is when you're in the middle of it. Like, we all start novels with this dream of grandiosity, like the grandiose fantasy of what the book can be. The book can start off being War and Peace, but after a while, it's war. After a while, it's whoa, and it's getting, and then you go, well, even though I thought I was going to write that, I wrote this. So now I'm going to deal with what this is, and I'm going to grapple with this. And you turn your attentions to the new thing. So I'm still at the grandiose fantasy, and I've been on book tour, so I haven't really been in one place to write yet, but I'm really excited about doing it because that's the happiest time, I think.
Can you say what the general idea is, or would you rather not?
I'd rather not yet. I think I'll run
Preserve a little mystery, yeah. Well, that's all I'm going to ask, and I'm going to open up the floor to everybody else. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much.